Okay, X, I know these Native American cryptid stories are played out to hell and back, but I have one to share from a few months ago. This is my first time telling anyone about it, and also my first time doing one of these, so bear with me. Be me, 18th birthday. Grandparents own 50-ish acres of forest around half an hour away, in between the mountainous and Piedmont regions of North Carolina. Decide for my birthday to go camping out with some of my friends. There's a total of 6 of us, including me. Let's call them Dave, John, Lisa, Andrew, and Sam. Around a half mile off the main road, there's a decently sized cabin. Okay, I'm going to drop the green text thing from here on out, as it'll be easier for me to explain this way. The cabin is mostly just one big room with a bathroom and an attic for storage. The main room consists of a single queen-size bed, a TV on a stand connected to a satellite antenna, a kitchenette, a table, and 4 chairs, and a few sofas. There was also an air mattress in the attic to sleep on. The idea was that 2 of us would sleep on the bed, and 1 person would sleep on the air mattress, while the other 3 used sleeping bags. Then the next night we would switch places, and so on and so forth. Anyways, we get up there in 2 cars, mine and Dave's. These guys are all pretty close to me, but some of them were unfamiliar with the others, particularly John. John was a co-worker of mine and no one knew him at all. At first it was kind of awkward, but as the night went on, we started drinking and everyone began having a good time. Even though the cabin had a fully equipped kitchenette, we had made a fire and were cooking hot dogs and s'mores on it. Shit didn't start getting weird until about 11 PM, give or take. We were all having a good time, drinking, telling stories, and just in general dicking around. One of my buddies, Sam, says something along the lines of, "Oh man, I need to piss," and walked off to a tree a ways away to do so. I didn't notice it at the time, but John later told me that at this point, he started getting really unnerved out of nowhere. After about 2 minutes of Sam being gone, a weird smell kind of rolled over into the area we were in. It smelled like burning rubber mixed with dry blood and a penny. I noticed it, but I don't think anyone else other than John really noticed it at this point, as it was really just a whiff. After another almost 5 minutes, Sam had finally come back from his piss. He seemed a little off somehow, but I didn't catch on to that something was really off until later. Over the course of around 10 or 15 minutes, the smell progressively got worse to the point where everyone had noticed it, and John suddenly stood up and said, "I think we should go inside, now." We all filed into the cabin, and then someone, I can't remember who, asked John, "Why the fuck did we need to come in for?" John's mother or grandmother, I can't remember exactly, was a Native American. John was really into the culture at the time and had visited some of his relatives off west various times. He started to explain to us that something might be fucking with us and that we should really be careful. All of us at this point wholeheartedly believe he was just fucking with us. I mean, at this point, all that had happened was a weird smell, right? That was when I realized something, and my stomach sank to my feet. There were only 5 of us in there. Right then, we heard a knock on the door followed by, "Hey, what happened?" I ended up walking off a little too far and got lost, and when I came back, the fire's out and y'all are inside? Keep in mind, it had been maybe a minute since when we stood up and got inside, and the fire was going fairly hard at that point. We let him in, and then I asked him, "What are you talking about? You were sitting right next to me out there." He then explained how that was impossible, and that he'd been stumbling around in the dark like an idiot for 20 minutes in a drunken stupor, trying to get back. The cabin then got really quiet. Not everyone stopped talking silent, but there is absolutely no noise type silent. I had spent many nights in the cabin before this point, and there was always the sound of the wind and various critters making noise 24/7. There was none of that now. What broke the silence was the sound of slow footsteps outside. It was unmistakable in the dead silence, a loud crunch on dead leaves, followed by the sound of the foot dragging across the ground, almost in a limp. The only reason we could hear it was due to the thin walls on the cabin. Another thing about the cabin is that there is a lot of windows. I'm not sure if it was a request of my grandfather's or if it was just standard, but there was around 6 or 7 windows in the main room. The footsteps were coming from the side of the house, almost directly underneath one of the windows, where it then stopped. Lisa slowly grabbed her phone out of her pocket and turned on the flashlight towards the window, as the cabin lights weren't on. As soon as the light hit the window, there was a flash of movement, followed by the sound of footsteps running deeper in the forest, much faster than before. While I, Lisa, John, Andrew and Dave were all scared as fuck, Sam started to get mad, saying how John and I were pranking him, and to just own up to it so he can go back to having fun. Just then, that nasty copper smell seeped into the room, and then we heard it. An ear-piercing scream. I have heard mountain lion screams before, and it really was the best description. However, it was more guttural, and sounded more like it was in pain, if that was possible. After about 5 minutes of this, it got dead silent again. Then, another knock on the door. What followed the knock was a voice that I could only describe as Sam's, but much more strained and without the cadence of Sam's voice. It repeatedly said, "Let me in, guys. Let me the fuck in, please," and knocking, clawing at the door. As the thing went on yelling this, the facade of Sam's voice began falling apart as the voice got deep and deeper, eventually sounding like one of those Elmo toys where the battery was dying and the voice got really low. This persisted for about 2 hours, and then after it finally stopped, it began pacing around the house, occasionally yelping like a hurt dog or something. I had multiple guns hidden away in the cabin, including a Marlin 30-30 lever action that I grabbed. I turned on the porch light to the cabin and threw the door open, and saw whatever it was jump back into the tree line. I fired off a few shots in its general direction, then threw the door shut again. Shortly after the door closed, the screaming from before came back, but deeper, almost as if it was mad now. The rest of the night was followed by it patrolling around the house, occasionally making some sort of noise while we tried to keep guard. At some point, I had fallen asleep, and when I woke up, a few of the others were up packing everyone's stuff. The sun was now up. It was around 7:30 a.m. or so. Shortly after, we left the house and began walking back to the cars, as we had parked a few hundred yards away due to the path being too thin. As we were walking back, we kept hearing movement off in the woods on both sides, and eventually we broke off into a sprint, and it followed. I turned around at one point, and got a pretty clear glimpse of it before it threw itself into the woodline. It was probably a foot taller than me while hunched over, so around 7.5 feet tall. It had patches of fur on it in irregular pattern, with the rest of it looking like rotted skin. Its arms were way longer than they should have been, and ended in long, slender fingers, and its head looked almost like a mix between a deer and a wolf. We managed to reach our cars and go the fuck out of Dodge. None of us have talked to each other about it since it happened, with the exception of me and John. He explained all of the skinwalker stuff to me, and we are supposed to go back to spread some sort of ashes or something around the cabin and do some other things to ward the thing off. I have been hunting in and camping out in that land since I was a small child, and I've never experienced something like that. The only thing I can think of that was different was that there had never been more than 4 people down there at once, and we had never partied or stayed up that late. I don't know if that thing was always there, and I just never bothered it before, or if it had moved in. If you guys have any suggestions as to what to do, I'm all ears.